When you think back to your childhood, you might remember moments that seemed small at the time, but ended up shaping who you are today in ways you never fully noticed. A single sentence, a simple nod of approval, or even the absence of praise can quietly mold your sense of worth, your confidence, and the way you walk into every room of your adult life. Most people think praise is just a nice bonus, a small emotional reward scattered throughout childhood. But psychology shows something deeper. Praise becomes part of your inner voice. It becomes the script your mind repeats in moments of doubt, challenge, success, or fear. The strange thing is that praise does not just tell a child they did something right. It tells them who they are, or at least who they should be. And as adults, then they walk around with labels they never chose, but labels that were handed to them before they even learned who they truly were. Some children grow up receiving praise that feels warm and genuine. Phrases like, "I'm proud of you," "You worked hard," or "I saw how much effort you put into that," create a foundation of confidence that feels steady and real. These children learn that their value comes from their actions, their dedication, and their choices. They grow up believing that they can try, fail, try again, and still be worthy. They become adults who are not crushed by mistakes because they learned early that errors are part of growth. They understand that improvement is a journey, not a verdict on their character. This type of praise, often called process-based praise, builds resilience. It teaches a child that success is something they can control. And when you believe you have control, life feels less threatening, less overwhelming, less like an unpredictable test you're destined to fail. But for many others, the praise they received was different. Instead of hearing you worked hard, they heard you're so smart, you're the talented one, or you're the best at this. At first, this kind of praise feels like a gift. What child doesn't want to believe they're naturally gifted or uniquely special? It creates a burst of pride, a feeling of being above the average, chosen, exceptional in some mysterious way. But hidden inside this praise is a trap. When you tell a child they are good because they are naturally gifted, you unintentionally create fear. A fear of slipping, a fear of not living up to the label, a fear of disappointing the people whose approval became a form of oxygen. These children grow up chasing perfection, terrified of failure. Because failure doesn't just feel like a mistake, it feels like an identity collapsing. So they avoid challenges, withdraw from situations where they might not shine, and choose the safest path instead of the most meaningful one. And then there is the third group, the children who rarely receive praise at all. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because the adults around them didn't offer it. Maybe their parents were overwhelmed, distracted, emotionally distant, or stuck in their own unresolved battles. Maybe praise was seen as unnecessary or even harmful. Instead of hearing you did a good job, they heard nothing or worse. They heard criticism, comparison, or indifference. These children learn a different lesson, that nothing they do is ever enough. They grow up believing they must constantly prove themselves, earn their place, and outperform everyone just to feel a small hint of worth. Or, in some cases, they stop trying entirely because they internalize the belief that effort won't lead to recognition anyway. As adults, each of these groups carries invisible psychological patterns. Imagine two people entering a job interview. One stands tall, not because they think they are perfect, but because they trust their ability to learn. Another enters the same room, terrified of not having all the answers, afraid one wrong word will expose them as a fraud. And a third person walks in feeling like they don't even deserve the opportunity, convinced they are already behind before the conversation even begins. These inner beliefs don't come from adulthood, they were planted in childhood, shaped by the type of praise received or the absence of it. Many adults don't realize that the discomfort they feel in social situations, the anxiety before starting something new, the exhaustion after trying to be perfect, or the fear of being judged is not actually about the present moment. It's an echo, a memory they no longer consciously remember, still carry inside them like a quiet shadow. The way you respond to pressure, the way you handle criticism, the way you pursue goals, and even the way you love is deeply influenced by the type of affirmation your younger self was exposed to. What is even more fascinating is how praise affects your inner dialogue, the voice you hear when no one else is speaking. If you were praised for effort, your inner voice says, "I can try again." If you were praised for talent, your inner voice says, "If I fail, it means I'm not good enough." And if you grew up without praise, your inner voice often says, "Why bother? It won't matter anyway." This inner voice becomes your constant companion as an adult, guiding your decisions, shaping your personality, and influencing your confidence without you ever realizing where it came from. Even in relationships, childhood praise leaves fingerprints. Those who are genuinely encouraged tend to communicate honestly, handle conflict more smoothly, and trust their worth, even during difficult moments. Meanwhile, people who are praised only for perfection often enter relationships wearing emotional armor that hide their vulnerabilities, afraid of being seen as flawed. And adults who lacked praise may find themselves craving validation from partners, friends, or co-workers because they never learned how self-worth feels from within. You might even notice these patterns in small, everyday moments. Hesitating before posting something online because you fear it won't be good enough. Feeling uncomfortable when someone compliments you because praise doesn't feel natural. Apologizing too often. Overthinking every decision. Or becoming paralyzed when faced with something new because deep down you fear you might not succeed. These small patterns, repeated over years, shape the way you see yourself and the world. And the root of many of them can be traced back to the words that were spoken or not spoken during childhood. What is most remarkable is that our brains don't stop responding to praise as we grow older. The adult mind still craves validation, still reacts to positive reinforcement, still seeks patterns of approval that feel familiar. The difference is that as adults, we have the power to reshape the narrative, to rewrite the inner script, to notice when we are living by a voice that belongs to our past, not our present. And that shift, however small it may seem, is where true self-esteem begins to rebuild. Many adults discover, often much later in life, that their struggles with confidence were never truly about their abilities, but about the meaning they attached to praise when they were young. You might know someone who is incredibly talented but constantly doubts themselves, or someone who seems fearless on the outside yet collapses under pressure when things go slightly wrong. And you might know people who achieve incredible things quietly without boasting because deep down, they were raised with the steady belief that effort has value, that progress is meaningful, and that self-worth is not something you earn from the outside world, but something you grow from within. As we move further into adulthood, we begin to interact with environments that test the foundations laid in childhood. Workplaces that reward competitiveness, social circles that measure status, online spaces that magnify comparison. These environments don't create insecurity on their own, they simply activate what already exists within us. And so, the child who received conditional praise becomes the adult who constantly seeks external approval. The child who is told they were naturally talented becomes the adult who avoids challenges that might expose them. And the child who rarely received praise becomes the adult whose accomplishments feel invisible, even to themselves. This is why so many adults carry a quiet sense of dissatisfaction. They move through life with the feeling that something is always missing, yet they can't quite identify what it is. They think the problem is their job, their relationships, their goals, or even their personality. But often, the missing piece is the sense of inner validation they never learn to build. They keep waiting for someone to tell them they're doing well, someone to point out their value, someone to fill the void that should have been nurtured when they were young. But here is where psychology offers something incredibly hopeful. The brain is adaptable. Even if childhood praise shaped your early identity, it doesn't have to define your entire life. Adults can learn new ways of internalizing self-worth. You can teach yourself to value effort the way you should have been taught. You can learn to separate your identity from your mistakes. You can create a new internal voice that encourages rather than criticizes, supports rather than sabotages. And you can begin recognizing the signs of growth, no matter how small, instead of only celebrating the final result. One of the first steps in this transformation is recognizing the patterns. When you catch yourself avoiding new opportunities because you're afraid to fail, ask yourself where that fear originally came from. Was it truly the present situation or the pressure of a childhood label that feels threatened? When you find yourself craving someone's approval, pause and ask whether the validation you seek is actually about the person in front of you, or whether you're trying to fill a gap left long ago. When you feel invisible after achieving something, remind yourself that the absence of recognition in childhood taught you a lie, that only extraordinary success counts, that anything less is meaningless. This is why self-compassion is one of the most powerful psychological tools available. Not the soft, superficial kind, but the deep realization that you are allowed to be imperfect, allowed to grow slowly, allowed to change your mind, allowed to rest, allowed to be enough even on days when you accomplish nothing extraordinary. Self-compassion rewires the inner voice. It tones down the pressure of perfection. It reduces the fear of judgment. It teaches you that effort is worthy, growth is valuable, and mistakes are part of becoming more human. Interestingly, adults who grew up lacking praise often become incredibly strong sources of praise for others. They encourage friends, support coworkers, and uplift people they care about because they know how painful the absence of affirmation can be. But they rarely turn that same kindness inward. They offer praise outwardly, but refuse to receive it inwardly. And this becomes another quiet pattern. Instinct to reject compliments, to downplay achievements, to shrug off any recognition because it feels foreign or undeserved. Yet the truth is that if you can offer praise to others, you can learn to offer it to yourself. The skill already exists inside you, you just need to redirect it. Meanwhile, adults who grew up being praised for being gifted often struggle to accept mediocrity in themselves. They want to excel at everything immediately, and when they don't, they feel inadequate. These are the people who quit hobbies as soon as they get difficult, who avoid learning new skills because looking inexperienced feels painful, who hide their potential under the fear of being exposed as less than perfect. But perfection is a myth, a shadow that follows people who were once told they were exceptional. The truth is that greatness comes from consistency, not talent. And when you release the pressure to be outstanding all the time, you finally give yourself permission to grow. Adults raised with healthy, balanced praise often show a kind of quiet confidence. But even they can be shaken by life. A harsh boss, a toxic relationship, a major failure, any of these can unbalance even the most grounded person. Yet their foundation remains. When they fall, they eventually rise. When they face doubt, they push through because they learned something powerful early on, that self-worth doesn't disappear. When life gets messy, it bends but doesn't break. It wavers but doesn't vanish. And with the right mindset, anyone, no matter their past, can build that same inner stability. You might wonder whether your childhood praise patterns can truly change your adult life. The answer is yes, overwhelmingly yes. Your beliefs about yourself, your reactions to challenges, your emotional habits, all of these can be reshaped. The human brain is not a fixed machine. It is a living, adaptable system capable of continuous transformation. What you repeat, you become. What you practice, you strengthen. What you choose to believe, you eventually embody. And when you begin replacing old patterns with healthier ones, you start creating an identity that reflects who you truly are, not who you were told to be. Imagine speaking to your younger self for a moment, the child who tried so hard to impress someone, or the child who hid fear behind talent, or the child who wished just once to hear, "I'm proud of you." What would you say to them now? You would probably offer compassion, encouragement, forgiveness, and understanding. You would tell them they didn't have to be perfect, that they didn't have to earn love, that their worth was never tied to performance. And if you can say those things to your younger self, then you can begin saying them to the adult you have become. The truth is that childhood praise is not just about childhood. It is a lifelong echo that follows us into every stage of life. But echoes fade when you stop repeating them. New voices emerge when you create them. Self-worth grows when you nurture it. And identity becomes stronger when you choose it intentionally rather than inheriting it from old patterns. You are not defined by the praise you received, nor by the praise you lacked. You are defined by the meaning you choose to give your past and the direction you decide to take from this moment on. Healing from the weight of childhood praise patterns is not about rewriting the past, but about reclaiming the present. It's about recognizing how powerful your mind is, how adaptable your brain can be, and how capable you are of changing the internal rules by which you live. You do not have to live your entire life based on lessons you learned before you understood what they meant. You can grow new beliefs. You can build new confidence. You can become someone who praises themselves with honesty, with balance, and with compassion. And in doing so, you become free. Free to try, free to fail, free to rise, free to create a version of yourself that belongs not to your past, to your potential, free to walk into your future without the weight of expectations you never chose. Free to understand that self-worth is not something given to you as a child. It is something you can build, nourish, and strengthen every single day. When you look in the mirror now, you are not just seeing the adult you have become. You are seeing the child you once were, and the future you are still capable of creating. And somewhere within that reflection lies a new story waiting to be written, one in which your worth is not borrowed from approval, not measured by a perfection, and not limited by your past. A story in which you learn to praise yourself in the way you always needed, consistently, compassionately, and truthfully. And maybe, for the first time in your life, you'll finally believe it. If this message resonated with you, remember you're not alone in this journey. Subscribe to MindDecode HQ for more deep psychology insights, powerful truths, and stories that help you understand yourself on a whole new level. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and join me tomorrow for another mind-opening chapter.